Well, welcome back to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Gooden, and we've got a repeat offender on our hands today. RB is back for round two. I shouldn't say offender. That sounds really bad. But repeat guest, RB, first and foremost, thank you for coming back to the club.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, I think it's been about a year since we
Yeah.
last chatted. And so I'm excited to catch up with you. I know some things have changed in your life. We're going to get into that. But if you have not listened to RB's interview from before, I encourage you to go back. It's going to be linked probably up here and also down in the description and wherever you're consuming this. It'll be linked. Okay, go check it out. But can you give us like a quick taste, like give the people a quick hit of like what your homeschool journey was like, just the quick elevator pitch of like what it was, so if they do want to go back and listen, what they're in store for there.
Quick and dirty for a repeat offender. I got it. Um, yeah, so I never went to a regular like public school or even a private school, right? My entire education from preschool or kindergarten up to college at 17 was homeschooling. And it was myself and my two sisters who were pretty close in age to me primarily. And I experienced homeschooling in two different states, Kansas, um, and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania was where I was born, and we moved to Kansas when I was 13. So there's some nuances there in how homeschooling worked in those states, but also the kinds of curriculums, and I would say even more so the kinds of homeschooling groups and religious groups that we were affiliated with in both places, and those certainly shaped that experience. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
To your point about the nuances and the differences between homeschool states, I also just had the uh leader, not leader, but the chairman, I don't remember her title, but Tess Olray, I think is how you say her name, and I'm butchering it. I'm waking up, guys. I haven't had my coffee yet today, and that's okay. But anyway, I had Tess from the Coalition for Responsible Home Educators or
Mm.
Education on the show, and we talked a lot about the states and how they differ, and we're gonna have some other people back on and talk more about that. So if that's also something you want to know, link for that down below. All right.
I would like to understand that better because I think part of what defined my experience was that there was a lack of accountability, right? And
Absolutely.
that definitely shapes. So I love that folks who are choosing that path today are also choosing ways to hold themselves accountable, right?
Yeah. No, and I think that's the cool thing about what they're doing. They are kind of, I don't want to say the antithesis, but a little bit of like HSLDA, where HSLDA wants everything to be up to parents to decide every little nuance and everything. And there's
Yeah.
some credence to some of that. But the
That's
coalition is much
homeschool legal
more.
defense for those of you who
Yes.
don't know. As a
Yeah.
like I was in what we would consider one of the first generations of homeschoolers, right? I consider myself not a millennial, but also not a Gen Xer. I'm a Zennial, right? I'm 1982, grew up in the 80s, right? That kind of generation. So I was the first one in my county to be homeschooled. So that yeah, that early experience and like all the parasitic organizations that were cropping up to leech off of people who chose that path.
Right.
I'm very familiar with.
Yeah. So what I think is great about the coalition, one of the big things that they're pushing for is just like very common sense standards across the board for our states. And so anyway, go check them
Love
out.
that.
Link down below. And
Yeah, I want to
again,
listen
we're
to
gonna
that
have
one. I haven't listened yet.
yeah, and we're gonna have more of them on and talk more about what they do soon because it's really cool. I appreciate it because it's not something when you're a kid, you really don't realize that like the rules and regulations of my state when it comes to homeschooling are different from other states. California, I just assumed every other state was that way, you know. And then I come to find out I'm like, no, other states like they had to go for testing every year, and I'm like, I didn't have to do that. I'm thankful my parents did the few times that I did take testing, you know.
Yeah.
So, let's get into. You sent me. We've been messaging a little bit, and you kind of were like, "Hey, some life stuff has changed," and you wanted to chat about it. And one of the things you brought up was that was it over the summer you got diagnosed with ADHD?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Last summer. I can't believe it's been a year ago. That's crazy.
So talk me through that because I feel like it's kind of a big thing I'm seeing in my friend groups and just I think in people in general who are like 30s and 40s and they're starting to they missed the diagnosis when they were a kid. And now they're going back and getting it and they're like, "Oh my gosh, things are making sense now. It's unlocking things." So talk me through like what made you want to get tested in the first place? What was the process like? And then we'll get into like what you're doing with that information now.
There's a little bit of pre-story to the actual decision to be tested, and not to go into it a whole lot, but I think some of these things I mentioned in the previous episode, but there was a lot of trauma in my childhood. There's a lot of trauma in my childhood. There's a lot of trauma in my parents' childhood, and that kind of passing down of that trauma is just what happens. And so I had been working with a trauma therapist for 4 years, I think, at that point, and we worked through it was one of these things to where it was a little bit of a roller coaster. Like I'd work through some things, I'd be pretty good, I'd kind of be hit a dip again, I call him up, hey, I need to come chat with you. And there were a few points where he was kind of like, dude, you're good, like come see me anytime you want, but we don't need to do it, every month or, every other week as it was for a while. And every time he said that, I was like, yes, I have arrived. I am healed, right? And there were a few things. I don't know if this is how everyone's therapy journey is, but how mine was it was a lot of like very general things, and then it was very specific things that were triggering or that happened. And because of the work that I had done and he had helped me with, I was able to recognize that and go address it pretty much right away. Right. So this had been kind of going on for, like I said, about 4 years. And then I kind of reached this point to where I was like, I don't need this kind of therapy anymore. And my whole kind of view of life had not just all of a sudden, but had kind of shifted, right? Away from a trauma narrative, away from like, I am who I am because of my parents, right? And there's, I just want to say for anyone listening to you, if that's where you are right now, it's okay, right? That is part of the journey, but I promise you it is not the end of the journey. Keep at it. So I reached this point and I was like, okay, I don't, like, I'm ready to move forward with my life, right? And it wasn't from the like I'm shoving down what happened to me. It is that I now have the tools to be able to handle it, right? When it comes up, and I have a better understanding of all the things that have happened. So when I got to that point, I was able to let go of a lot of the coping mechanisms that I had kind of internalized in my experience. And it was things like, you see people wearing t-shirts, right? I lift heavy weights so I don't kill people, right? It's that kind of like, I didn't need those same tools that would just completely take me out of my mind and out of my body in some cases, to a pain cave, to where I could go there and that felt safe, right? So there were multiple things that I was like, I don't need this anymore. I don't need this anymore. I don't need this anymore. And I entered this space that my wife and I like to call RB's manic phase, because all of a sudden I had time and I had energy, because I wasn't putting it towards controlling everything around me so that I wouldn't be triggered. And so over the span of like a few months, I started like 4 businesses. I did a bunch of really, looking back, like kind of dumb stuff that if I had been in a better, a healthier state of mind, I wouldn't have necessarily done. But all of that was me like trying to figure out who I was without the shackles of trauma, essentially. right? And as I kind of started looking at like, okay, what is this, what am I doing, right? Because I immediately overwhelmed myself. I started a co-working space. I started like vending. I bought $2,000 worth of B movie star autographs because I was positive that I was going to be able to flip these and sell them for so much money. I started going to I was going to the state surplus store and buying used pocket knives and like vending those at different shows and events. And um, I put all of this burden onto myself because I didn't know at the time what I was looking for. And like I said, I had never experienced this kind of freedom before. And God bless my wife. Like she was so kind and so gracious and just because I was really stubborn too, and I couldn't hear what other people were telling me because she was like, I don't think that whole picture thing is going to work out like you think it's going to. Shout out if any of your followers want autograph pictures from B movie stars from like the 60s and 70s, like hit me up. I've got them. But I couldn't hear it, right? And I was just like so sure of everything. So this happened, and then I started to burn out. After a few months, I was like, I can't do all of this, and I've overextended myself, and I made commitments that are going to be really challenging for me to keep because I'm on the downward slope, and I didn't know what that meant. And during this time, I was, kind of following the social media trend, which I think it is a trend right now. There's a huge space that is like everyone is ADHD and you need all these tools, right? And that is a trap that I got caught in of like, let me sell you this fidget spinner, or let me sell you this piece of software, or sign up for this music app that's going to help. And some of them are helpful, some of them are not. But like you can dump all of your money into trying to manage whatever condition you think you have. So I got to the point where I was like, I think I have ADHD. And I remember one night there's an actual test you can go take online that is like a DSM, and you go through it. And I remember taking it and waiting for my results, and they didn't come quick enough, so I took it again, and those results didn't come quick enough, so I took it again. I took it 4 times in the space of like 20 minutes because I was so like, this is
Like you needed
I
the
was moving
answer.
fast.
You're
I
like,
need the answer now.
yeah.
And it came back as like probably. And I was like, God damn it. Um what do I do with this information? So I found a spot in Austin, which is an incredible place. And they're the only place that I know in this area of Texas that will do an actual come to our office. We will evaluate you. And it's not like we're going to chat with you and tell you maybe you have it. It's like we're going to get super detailed. It's like, it was like 6 hours of testing. And then there was like a like I sent them my kind of life history ahead of time. And then they took several weeks to basically go through that with a psychologist. And then a psychologist is actually the one who like calls you and says, like, here's what it is, here's what's going on. And so they did that. And there's so many things I learned. So yes, you have ADHD, and there are different types of ADHD, and what you have is called inattentive ADHD. And what inattentive ADHD is it's an imbalance in some of the ways that your brain processes or stores information. So for me, there was no, and there's different systems inside of your brain essentially that do different tasks, and all of mine were like around normal, except for one was lower and then a few were much higher. And how they explained it was it's not so much like where you are it's where you are relative to the other parts of your brain and those
Right.
processing speeds. So for me, working memory is really low. And one of the tests I did was like, I'm going to tell you a 10-digit number. When I finish with the last number, I want you to write that number down. Right. And I couldn't do it. I could get like four numbers in, and then I didn't know what it was. Right. So it was very specific. Like we're testing specific types of brain processing. So once I got that diagnosis, I was like, okay, it didn't feel real. It didn't
Mhm.
feel like, I think some people experience like, okay, this makes so much sense, right? That didn't come later until I started with the medication, which we'll get into. But um, yeah, that's like the pre-story into the like how I decided to get tested.
Well, I think one of the things I picked up on that I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about is the fact that there's different types of ADHD. And I think
Right.
that's important in the way you kind of described it of like looking at where your brain levels are and how they are relative to each other, not just
Mhm.
in general of like, hey, if everything is low, then you're, I mean, probably to some degree, then your diagnosis this, but also how they
Right.
impact each other is super interesting. And yeah, because that's the reality of like the more people I know who are like, okay, yeah, I'm ADHD. I'm like, but you all are so different. Like there's not a like common thread, so to speak, of like you all just like forget this one thing or like I'm married to an ADHD person. They don't close the cabinets. Sorry, babe. Love you. But like it's like one of those things where it's like I have just learned that it's like I'll just do it. It's not a big deal. I'll go
Yeah.
and close the cabinets. And like the object permanence thing of like if it's
Yep.
out of sight, it's out of mind. And
Yes.
so learning those things about people, it's like, okay, but not everybody who has ADHD struggles with that. Well, why is that? Okay. So very interesting. So now that you've got your diagnosis, you said it took a while to kind of like hit you of like, okay, I've got this and like a wave of relief or like just an understanding of like okay, yeah, it's real. Because I have
Yeah.
some friends who it's like it's instantaneous. They get the results and they're just like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Like instantly, it's like weight rolls off the shoulders, kind of a deal. So that it doesn't seem like that totally happened for you. It took a little bit, but once that started to kind of kick in, and you're like, okay, now I can do something with this. What are we doing with this information now?
I started on some medication, and um, part of this journey has also been around how do I connect ADHD to the rest of my health, right? So my primary care physician at the time was like, I get it. Um, I am not going to prescribe you a stimulant. You're in your 40s. And people in their 40s, I'm more concerned about their heart health than I am about management of a ADHD or ADD. Or so he was like, I'm not telling you no. I'll give you some things to try that are non-stimulant options, but if you want a stimulant, you need to go see another physician. So I was really grateful that he was very open and honest about what he was willing to do and what he wasn't willing to do and why. So I did try some non-stimulant options, and they were more of the like, they'll take your limbic system and help it calm down, right? So your fight or flight response. Um, and those, I didn't notice a difference. Like
Yeah,
that wasn't the challenge, because that is another type of ADHD to where
right.
you can get locked into that. Um, so that wasn't the right medication for my type of ADHD. So then I tried Ritalin, and this is where it kind of starts like getting into the childhood stuff, which is tied to homeschooling and how that all happened. Because we had a kid in our neighborhood in Pennsylvania who was on Ritalin, and he was not sure where on the spectrum he was, but he was in the like, I am a functioning human area, without a lot of cognition, right?
Yep.
So he could go
Yep.
to school. He was in the more focused classes that can help someone whose brain works like that. But the way that my parents treated it was, he is like that because he is on Ritalin. If they would take him off Ritalin, he would be a normal kid, right?
Right.
So there's some tapes that are playing. And for you young people, a tape is like a cassette that we used to put into something and press play and it would roll a tape. So, um, but the old tapes of like, if I take this, it's going to destroy my life, right? It's
Right.
going to turn me into a zombie. I'm going to get addicted to it. It's something that's going to like start controlling me rather than me being able to control my own life. It's not true, right? It's not true.
Right.
Now, are they potentially uh dangerous? Yes. Are they habit forming? Yes, they are. And that is why you need physician assistance and oversight with these kinds of medications. Because if I've had conversations with my psychiatrist of this dosage like made me feel like $1 million, and I was crying because I'd never felt my brain all working in the same way before. And their response was, that's fantastic. Also, that means it's too high of a dose because you're going to get addicted to that, right? So we're going to take that back down. We're going to like, the goal is that you slowly ramp up and you slowly ramp off, right? So
Right.
there's not this like, I took this drug and now I'm a super, I have superpowers.
Right.
If you want more information about that, go watch the Limitless movie with Bradley Cooper. But
Yeah. I was thinking about that as you were saying that, but I think what you said there about like the doctor oversight thing is like really important because I think I'm kind of that way too with drugs and stimulants and things like that, where I'm just like, are they gonna be addictive? Are they gonna be, and it's hard because it's like you need those people in your life who are gonna also help regulate you to some degree, and you need the people who are also with you on a day-to-day basis to understand
right.
what you're going through. And
Yes.
and because they can start throwing up the red flags and the green flags of like, yes, this is working, and no, it's not working, or something is really wrong here. And so I think that's important that you said that because so many people, they want the miracle pill, right? They want to take it
Right.
once and and be like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And it's like, that's just not the way the human body works. Like we are a very delicate chemical balance, and sometimes it goes out of balance, and we got to fix that with some prescription drugs, and that's okay. But it's just like it's going to change again at some point. Your chemical balance doesn't stay the same always. It is always in flux, and so it makes sense that your
It's
drugs
so
would also
true.
be in flux. So so have we gotten the dosage dialed in at this
We've
point, or are we
gotten the
still working on it?
dosage pretty much dialed in. I switched from Ritalin to Adderall, and I just want to say out loud, a lot of people when they go on podcasts or whatever, they don't talk about the types of medication they're taking because they don't want people to think exactly that. Like, oh, Adderall is the one. I'm going to go ask my doctor for Adderall. Because I'm still like, Adderall is working, but I'm curious about Vyvanse. Like there's some things about Adderall that I'm like, uh, not great, but also maybe there's something else. So like, and I really appreciate what you said, because one of the challenges with all of this is thinking that there is a magic solution that is going to not only help today, but also is going to be the same for the rest of your life. And that very black and white thinking was something that was another coping mechanism that I learned early on, of like, someone was either safe or unsafe. There is no in between, right? And have been the type of person my whole life that I assume everyone is safe until they prove otherwise, and then get out of my life. I don't want to have anything to do with you, right? So along with the medication and figuring out the dosage, and meeting regularly with a psychiatrist. I'm also meeting regularly with a therapist who specializes in ADHD. And so it's taking everything from a trauma lens to help me understand how my brain works so that I don't just spin in circles, because that's a lot of the struggle I think that folks with ADHD have, is we get in this loop of I should I should be able to do this. I should be able to wake up and immediately check my messages on social media and not have it fuck my entire day up, right?
Right.
Because when I do that, my brain is now running and I have a very hard time trying to grab it and say, hey, it's time to answer that email from Brenda and talk about what we're going to work on next week, right? When I just watched someone be shot and killed on TV,
Exactly.
right? It's like I can't exist in two places at the same time. So I've learned like some things, like I keep my phone in the bathroom, right? It's very rare that I have my phone next to me at night anymore, um, because I will get lost in social media, um, and then I can't sleep. Sleep is super important for people with ADHD. And I think it's important for everyone, but I think it's easier for people with ADHD to be like, oh, I'm fine. I am hyper focused on this thing and I'm gonna stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning. And I know if I take Adderall the next day on only 4 hours of sleep, I'll still be able to function. And let me tell you, you can only do that so long. That is not a sustainable plan.
No, it's not. I used to work for a guy who would kind of go through spells of that where he would and we would have a meeting at the end of the week and I'd be like, "How many hours have you slept this week?" And if it was
Yeah.
less than 8, I was like, "Okay, you need to like get some help, please. Like
Yes.
next week needs to be different because like you are all over the place." And like I felt bad, but I was just like, I'm like, we're over Zoom, so it's like I can't physically be there for him, but I'm like, yo, something is really wrong here. So I think what you said about the phone is also really important. I'm guilty of that too. I think that just in general, our phones are a stimulant. They are meant to be, and
Yes.
social media in
Yep.
particular is meant to be a stimulant, and it's meant to fire certain synapses in your brain, right? And so it is one of those things where right now, especially with the fact that the news cycle is 24/7 and it's the stuff that always gets pushed the most is negative, it's nasty, it's evil, it's wicked. And so, yeah, I think what you were saying about just like keeping it in the other room and like being selective of when you check it and how you check it. Like I have all notifications turned off for social media. You DM me on social media,
Yes.
I'm checking it when I want to check it, kind of a deal.
I
So
love
I,
that.
and so when you earn enough trust in my life, I'll give you my phone number, and that will alert me as soon as you text me, kind of a deal. But anyway, so I appreciate you saying that.
Can we touch on that? Because I
Yeah.
feel like that's a concept that I really struggled to understand, because in the digital age, and I work completely remote, um, in the digital age, it's very hard to explain the circles of trust and to build those walls to protect yourself, right? And when I first started experiencing this, as or coming to understand, that was in the same space of like, I can do anything. So like I was on, I don't know if I ever made a Blue Sky account, but I was on Threads, I was on Instagram, I was on Facebook, right? I was like, maybe I want to be a content creator. And so like just opening myself up to the entire online world and not understanding what you just explained, that it's very important for us to have circles that are allowed to reach us at any time. And then there's usually a few other circles as you go out. You've got your business associates, which they are allowed to contact you at specific times. and not at other times. But usually there's one of those people that's in your inner circle. So if something's really blowing up, they're going to text you and be like, RB, I need you online. Right. And I'll be like, cool. You wouldn't have contacted me if you didn't need that. So I think that is something that I don't see. Obviously, I don't see it on social media, right? Because that is all the social medias want all of your attention. But it's been really important for me to kind of set up those boundaries of who can reach me in when and in what situations.
Again, that was like a huge shift for me this past year was when I turned off so what happened was like a year or so ago, might have almost maybe a year and a half ago or so, there was a big movement to do a social media blackout during, I want to say it was like Black Friday or Christmas. And it was just like commit to 2 days of no social media. And I was like,
Yeah,
hell yeah, I'm on board with this.
let's
I was
go.
looking at my screen time, right? And I was like, that is where I'm spending the majority of my time on my phone is on social media. And so I deleted everything off my phone for those 2 days. It was fantastic. I read books, I did puzzles, I watched movies. Like I still did YouTube because I don't consider YouTube a social media platform, even though it kind of technically is. But I was like, okay, but I'm not doing the messaging and I'm not doing the short stuff. I was like much more intentional of like long form content. And when I brought it back, I was like, okay, I'm turning notifications off. Like this cannot keep happening. So inside the app, yeah, all the bells and whistles go off. You know, it's all going to be there. It's going to show up for you. But as far as like my home screen goes, never, right? I don't, if you DM me, I don't see it until I go looking for it. And I go check every single day, but it's just, I can't do it. And it's the same with work stuff too. Like you were talking about,
Yeah.
I use Slack for some of my clients. It's like one of those things where it's like during regular office hours, I have it on. I won't always respond because if I'm in editing, I usually will put myself as like, I'm in the editing bay right now. Like, don't bother me kind of a thing. I'll get to it. But it is one of those things where it's like, you know, you have access to me during these hours. And then I also take it a step further, and when I respond to people, I'll schedule stuff out. If I'm working at midnight, because sometimes I do that, because we're all guilty of that, you know. But I will just set it to go to send it to them first thing in the morning, because it's one of those things where it's like I don't know if they have their notifications turned off, and I don't want to be bothering them at 2 in the morning, you know. Um, and so it's just
Can I
those
touch
little
on
intentional
something you
things.
just said?
Yeah,
See, you said we're all guilty of that. And these are the kinds of things that my therapist is helping me with now because you're not guilty, right? There's no shame in that. It's as humans, we have different energy spurts and different needs at different times, and that's okay. What's not okay is to not take care of yourself, right? So as long as you're like, I was up working at midnight and I'm going to clear 2 hours from my calendar tomorrow so I can sleep in a little bit and have a slower morning and allow myself as a mammal to let all of those chemicals release from my body so I can face the next day with the energy and the intention that I intend to. No shame.
you're so right. Yeah, no, you're so right, because that is definitely something where I think I tend to beat myself up. I think a lot of people tend to beat themselves up, right? Because like, who wants to be working at midnight, 2 a.m. in the morning? Nobody. But sometimes it's just when your brain is firing, and so it just makes sense to
Yes,
actually do that, right? And so it's like, you know,
absolutely.
I get creatively active sometimes at 2 in the morning, and I'm like, you know what?
Dude,
Let's
same.
just rock it, you know?
Yes. And that's also part of this journey is starting to understand that there are times when my brain is creative and there are times when it's not, right? And one of the challenges with taking a stimulant is for me, it lowers the creativity. I can focus on a task, right? But I can't um, go create a script that's going to make my job easier, right? Like that's not where I'm doing a thing and I'm going to do the thing and I'm going to finish the thing and it's hard, right? But that's not the creative space. So sometimes that creative space comes when the Adderall wears off. And I'm like, I have energy, and I've been wondering how to do this thing. Like, one of the thing, an example of this is like I stayed up until I think 4 o'clock in the morning, and this was during more of the manic phase. But like, I need for those pictures, I needed to figure out how to price them, right? So I was working with ChatGPT, and I was creating scripts in Google Sheets and doing things like I was hitting APIs and pulling back pricing information from like eBay and Etsy for this name, and building this. And I never built anything that complicated before. And I did it in a space of like 6 hours, which was amazing. Um, but I don't know that I could replicate that with the energy I have right now. Right. So just understanding that there's different times, and part of that is just your awareness, right? And I think that's what the trauma therapy taught started to teach me, was awareness of how triggers show up in my body, right? Because now I'm ever able to leverage that I've learned and be like, okay, now without the trauma piece, how is what I'm doing and what I'm thinking showing up in my body today? Right. And how do I want to change that or not? Or is that a recognition of like, oh, when I sit here and I take deep breaths for 60 seconds, my shoulders drop, and the speed that I talk slows, and I gain clarity, and I'm not in this stressed out situation where like I have a deadline in an hour and I put this off because I have ADHD, and now there's such a sense of urgency that I've got to get it done. But I can be aware enough about my body to, okay, you are not in danger, right? Your body is reacting to before you got beat by your dad right now, right?
Right. Right.
Let it go. Let it go. If you need to ask your boss, hey, can I get this to you tomorrow morning? I'm working on it. I promise I'll have it to you then, but it's not going to be by 6 p.m. tonight, right? And then you can take those breaths and you can move on. But that awareness is something that the trauma therapy really helped me with, and the ADHD therapy is just kind of helping take that to the next level.
I was gonna ask you kind of like now with that ADHD like diagnosis, and now that you're learning the skills to manage that, right? And you're looking at as you look back and you go, okay, like you've obviously done a lot of work in like healing your trauma, right? But as you are able to like look back and look at your childhood and things like that, does it
Yeah,
make it a lot more clear with like, okay, I acted this way in this situation because my brain is different, right?
right.
Maybe I needed medication, maybe I needed Ritalin, right? And then like
Yep.
it's like, eh, so how is that? What is that? How is that going in your brain? Like, what are you thinking when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Some of the earliest, like when I finally could accept, like, I have ADHD, because part of it was acceptance. And then once I was able to accept it, it was like, okay, now what do I do about it? Because you don't have to. Like, there's plenty of people that have this that choose not to go down the medication path. They find other ways to handle it. But one of the things that really helped it become real for me was thinking about times in my childhood that it was very clear that this was a condition that I had, right? So when I think I was 9 or 10, I can like picture it in my mind sitting at my desk, because we got actual like school desks in the kitchen. I'm sitting there and I'm staring at a blank sheet of paper, and I'm going to get emotional about this, but I remember staring at a blank sheet of paper, and my assignment was write a research paper on Pearl Harbor. And I remember for 3 days staring at a blank sheet of paper, and I could not put anything down. on that piece of paper. And I am so grateful that my parents did not punish me for that. They actually, once they saw how much I was struggling, they were like, okay, we think maybe this was too big of a task. Like maybe just do like a book report on a book that you read about Pearl Harbor, right? And I was able to do that. But recognizing that experience, which still is like seared into my being, right? And I can still feel that anxiety trying to creep in. That was ADHD. That's because I didn't have enough working memory to be able to read something, be able to restate it in my own words and write it down. Like, and besides, like really at 9 or 10, like a subject that huge, you're gonna ask a kid to do that. So that goes back to the whole like, what is reasonable to ask kids in a certain grade level to do, right? Based on research and people who have studied this kind of thing of how brains develop their entire lives, right? We were not informed by that. We were informed by Abeka says that this is third grade material that a third grader should be able to do. Therefore, do this, right? So there's been multiple experiences like that I've been able to think back and be like, just, and it's not just remembering, right? And this is part of what I've learned in therapy. It's remembering and it's talking to that little boy, and it's saying, you didn't have the tools you needed, right? You didn't have the tools you needed. No one around you understood what was happening, and that's okay. You're okay. You did what you could, and you were trying, and there was nothing wrong or evil or bad about you, that you weren't able to do this quote unquote simple thing that someone had asked you to do, right? And it's so important for us as humans, I think, to get to the point where we can revisit those traumatic pieces in our past. And people listening to this might be like, I mean, come on, that's fucking ridiculous. You're going to call like being required to write a research paper traumatic. And I will counter with, trauma is not the event that happens to you. Trauma is the story you tell yourself about yourself to make it through that experience, right? So the story that I told myself was, you're bad, you're evil, you're broken, there's something wrong with you. They had to dumb this assignment down for you because you couldn't do it, right? And that is the trauma. And that is what I can go back and heal.
What you said there is like super powerful, because the biggest thing I've come to realize in the last probably 2-ish years is like, I discounted my own traumas always because I felt like they were nothing compared to what other people had gone through, right? Being
Yeah.
physically beaten, sexually assaulted, drug abuse, like just crazy stuff, right? The things that we label as like, oh my God, that must be insanely painful, right? And what I realize is like what you just said, it's the narrative associated with it. It's not
Yes.
always just the thing. And so that has been a huge eye-opening thing for me, as I, like you were talking about, going back and talking to your younger self and saying that it's okay. Your feelings are valid, and like giving them a big hug and say, you're safe here, and that shouldn't have happened to you, but nobody knew how to deal with it, and you didn't know how to deal with it. And that's okay. That's okay
Yeah.
that you didn't know how to deal with it, you know, but you know now, and you can do better now. And so
Yes.
that's like, that's a big thing. And so I appreciate you saying that, because it is just this like, it's a mind fuck in a lot of ways, of like you were
It
saying,
is.
like the way we react and the way we do, things that trigger us, and we act out and we do a certain, this is our coping mechanism. This is the thing we do, right? It's like, and then you start to unpack it and you're like, oh man, I'm like really screwed up, right? Like I got so many journal entries at this point where I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? you know? Um and I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I am a mess half of the time. And, but it's taking those
All
little
are.
steps. Yeah, it's taking those little steps day by day, and it gets better, it gets easier, it gets faster, and so and then you get to a place where it's like it doesn't control you. And so like hearing at the beginning when you were talking about like kind of getting through trauma therapy to where you're like, okay, I have the tools now to deal with that, and it's given me freedom to now have access to this time, this energy that I didn't have before. That's huge. That's like a
Yes.
massive win, right? And like I want to applaud you. That's like incredible, and so yeah, but and so and I'm hoping for that. I mean, I see that in my life in little wins, but like I hope that for all of the people who have come on the show, the people who listen, like as you work through these things, it will pay off at some point. It does.
Yes.
It's just taking the
Yes.
time to get there.
Yes. And it's good
One
to
of the
reflect on that. That's one of the reasons, honestly, that I wanted to have this conversation because it's helpful for me to kind of see how far I've come. And that's not pride. I mean, maybe it is pride. I mean, of course I was grown up to believe that pride was a deadly sin, but I can be proud of myself, right? For the work that I put in, for the journey that I'm on. And I'm not there. I haven't arrived. I will never arrive, right? Um, but it's worth the time, and it's worth the energy, and it's worth the wrestling with your past to to get to a point where you can see things in a different light. And being diagnosed with ADHD has helped me to look at some of my childhood stuff differently, right? And see that in a lot of ways, my parents were trying super hard. They didn't know what to do. And it wasn't like I was a wildly different kid than everyone else, but obviously I had struggles that were unique to me, and they did not have the tools or the information to be able to process that, notice it even sometimes, because of their own unresolved shit. I mean, my mom grew up, working as a child laborer in the Heinz ketchup fields in Pennsylvania, right? My dad was adopted when he was 6 weeks old because his family didn't want him. And like, I look at my life and then I look at their lives and I'm like, what a beautiful example in a lot of ways, even though some of the stuff that happened to me was terrible and I would never want it to happen to someone else. What a beautiful view of evolution through generations of where we're trying to be better, right? And some of
right.
this, like I was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, my childhood was my dad beat my mom in front of us, but he never beat us because his dad beat him. And that was him being a good dad to us. Right. And what a horrible situation that you had to be there and watch your mom be abused. Right. And also now he is coming out of that same like trauma and wanting better for his future. Right. So it's not like I can go back and excuse I'm estranged from my dad, right? That's something that's happened in the last year or two, because there's certain things that he has done in his life that I cannot explain through that lens, right? They are heinous and evil, and I cannot have a relationship with him unless he addresses those things, and he's not willing to do that, and he may never be willing to do that, right? But I can see a lot of the other things that impacted me directly as he was trying to help me. He just had no fucking clue what he was doing, and his experience was worse than mine.
I think what you said there it's something I've said on the show before. I say it all the time. It's like I know that my dad is better than his dad, and I want to be better
Yeah,
than my dad, right? And
yeah,
that's exactly what you just said. It's the evolution process of like taking the things that they did poorly and doing them better, but also taking the things that they did right and continuing to do them better, right?
yes,
The other thing that you said there that really struck me, and this is kind of going back even earlier in our conversation when we talked about like black and white, right? And that's
Yeah.
something that as two people who grew up very religious, black and white is like that's the answer to everything, right? It's God or
Yes.
Satan, it's good and evil, right? It's like black and white. Everything is black and white. It's like historically accurate or like a complete lie and sham, right? And so it's very interesting now existing in that gray space, right? Because
Yes.
it's hard. You see the ways that our parents messed up, or right, or the things that traumatize us. Those are bad. Those are arguably bad. But then there's all this gray space of like you were just saying, there's like they were trying to be better to some
Yes.
degree than their parents were.
Yeah.
So it's like hard because it's like where do you start to draw those lines? It becomes a lot trickier of like when and how and all these things. And so I applaud anyone who's on that journey because like it's not easy to kind of start to figure out and draw those lines. And eventually you have to, right? And
Hmm.
it can be messy and it's not fun and it's painful, but it's one of those things where it's like existing in the gray space now has, oh my gosh, it has freed me up in so many ways where I'm just like, I'm
Same.
okay not really having the answer. I'm okay just kind of being like, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. I think it's in the middle here, and that's okay, you know? And so I applaud you again for doing that work and continuing and like sharing about it because it's not easy. It's also not easy to talk about it.
Yeah, it's getting easier to talk about it. Sometimes I think I bore people, and I probably do. But it's also kind of fun being that one guy in the friend group who like you go around the room and you're like, sharing stories from your childhood, and then I share something and everyone's like, "Holy fuck!" Everyone gets quiet, and I'm like, "Oh, I said too much."
Yeah, you're like, okay. Um, I had one
But
other
I love.
question. Go ahead.
Yeah,
No, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was actually gonna slightly. I was gonna play off the gray, living in the gray. So if
Yeah.
you've got.
No, I was gonna completely pivot. So I mean,
Okay.
let's go.
Yeah.
Let's stay in the gray.
Okay. I've got a working title for my autobiography that is Ascent to Gray. Um, because that's where everyone is, right? And in something, in our supercharged political climate that we're in, it is so black and white, and it's like that on both sides, right? And it's hard sometimes because the way that I see things now, it's almost challenging to connect to how I saw them even 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, 2016, and this is one of those things, like, I don't want to say this out loud, right? I voted for Trump, right? I did. That was the situation I was in. That was the world that I lived in. And I was starting to come out of that, but I was still connected enough to where I was like, man, Hillary's the devil, man. Like, Trump's bad, but good grief, like, she's it, right? So I voted for him. And now I see people on different social media sites saying, like, if you ever voted for Trump, you are out of my life. Like, I cannot trust you. You are the kind of person who is, you're not a critical thinker, and I can't have that in my life. And I recently saw a clip from Glennon and Abby's podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, and they did a tour last year, and they talked about this concept of there's a river of love and the betterment of humanity, and it's flowing, right? And we get in this space where we're worried, and we're like, oh, everything is worse than it has ever been in this country. In some ways it is for white people, right? But it's they talked about this concept of, like, there's boats on this river, and there's boats for immigrant justice, and there's boats for better education, and there's boats for better healthcare, right? And as humans, pick your boat and get on it. And also, once you're on that boat, you have no right to look at someone else who is trying to get on that boat and say, why weren't you here earlier? Right? And that's the narrative that I think needs to change, right? Because as things come to light, as people are starting to question the choices that they have made in the past that have affected the trajectory of this country, they need to feel like changing their mind is not something that they're not welcome to do, right?
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was a very much a tangent, and I wouldn't blame you if you don't put that in the
No,
podcast. That is totally fine.
you
Um,
know, I've been thinking a lot about this recently too, and like, in 2016, that was the first election I got to vote in. I was a senior in college. It was a big deal, mail-in ballot, and I remember sitting there and looking at it and having watched the news and all these things, and I grew up conservative. I was like, when Barack Obama was running for president, he was, I don't want to say he was the devil because I don't think that that was really what I believed, but I definitely was like, he is the evil
yeah,
side of it, and so but I remember sitting there and being like, can I really vote for Trump? And like, and I couldn't vote for either of them, and I went third party, and I knew that that was like a throwaway kind of a thing to some degree, but I was like, I was unpacking things, but I still had that taste of like Hillary Clinton is the devil.
yeah,
But I also was like, I couldn't do the Trump thing either. It was one of those really rough situations. And I remember just sitting there but what you said is great. It's like, it is okay to change your mind. That is the last 10 years of my life has been nothing but changing my mind. It has been
right.
shifting my perspective and in all aspects of my life, not only just
Mhm.
politically, religiously, and in who I am as a person and just everything, right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's again that gray area that we're talking about. It's the ability
Yes.
to ask the questions and say, okay, I don't know that this is good or this is bad. I just need to continue searching to figure that out, right? And find that
Hmm.
place for myself. And so I appreciate you saying that, and it probably will make it in. Um, so, you know, um, but yeah, I think, man, yes, we need to come to a place where we can be accepting of people changing their minds. And yes, we can be frustrated that it's like you didn't do it fast enough.
Yeah. I mean,
Eh,
I'm
we can't go
frustrated with
back and change.
myself that I
Yeah,
that I it wasn't faster, right?
right.
But
But the thing is,
I
we
would
can't go
not
back and
make that
change it.
same. Yeah, but I know I have become the person who would make a different choice today, right?
Right.
And I think that recognition and that like that is just human growth. That is
Yeah.
natural, and that's how like we should be learning. We should be changing, and that was something that growing up, change was scary, right? And part of the light that has changed for me in looking back is yes, homeschooling is a part of my story, and the way that homeschooling showed up for me was not healthy, right? And it was not healthy for my sisters. Um, but I look at my past more now through the lens of trauma and poverty than I do homeschooling. Right. I think when I was on the podcast for the first time, my story was a lot of like my experience was terrible, right? And it legit was in some ways. And the reason why my parents chose that instead of public education or instead of private education had a lot to do with poverty and had a lot to do with their own trauma. And so, while if I was them with the information that I know now, I would have made a different choice. I can understand the choices that they made and why they made them. Right. And that brings a lot of peace.
Yeah. I agree. The other thing I wanted to kind of that you had said in talking about like the river with the boats and like every boat is kind of these different topics. The thing that I've realized, especially last year, was there is this unfortunate call right now to be like you have to be informed about everything and you have to be
Mhm.
pro or anti whatever all
Yeah.
the time, right?
You have to pick a
And you have
side.
to pick a side, right? And I think that everybody should have their own opinions on whatever, but I also don't think that everybody can advocate for every injustice and
Yes.
everything wrong,
Yep.
right? And so that's why I really took the end of 2025 to evaluate where is it that I want to talk, where is it that I want to support the most,
Mm.
because we will be stronger the more that we get groups of people together to focus in on one area at a time, right? And so this podcast, we talk a lot about education. We talk about a lot about homeschooling, the alternatives to that. That's kind of the direction that the show is going to continue to go, is that vein of like, and childhood trauma and religion and that kind of a thing, because those things get grouped together. I'm not going to sit up here and probably talk about Israel and Gaza and the genocide and Palestine and the genocide that's happening there, because that's not my lane. That's not what I'm an expert in talking about. There's other shows that are going to talk about that.
Yeah.
This is a show where we're going to talk about education in the States, maybe in the world. We'll see. Maybe it'll come up at some point. Had a few people from out of the country be like, maybe we'll come talk about it. But childhood education, religion, and that process of growing up and the traumas surrounding that and the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's what this show's about. And that's where I want to focus. And that's where I want the people who are here to ride that ride with me. Great. That's our cause. That's what we're going for. Okay. Get on the boat
But
or hop on your own boat. It's okay. It's okay. That's
yeah,
just where we're at. So I
yeah,
appreciate
no,
you
I
saying
love
that.
that. And I even more so because I just saw that clip a few days ago. Even more so, I'm grateful for this opportunity because I am I'm on a different boat, right? But you inviting me and having this conversation means I get to hop on a boat that is really important to me, right? And I get to contribute to this space. And then, in 2 hours, I'm back on my other boat, right? Which
Right.
is which is how do we get healthcare to millions of people in this country who don't have sufficient access to it, right? That's the boat I'm on. That's the company I'm working for. That's the vision that I'm aligned with right now. Um, but I love that like you are taking ownership of this space and you are helping guide this boat down that river. Like I love that and I support you and I'm so grateful that you are using your platform for that.
Well, thank you. And I wanted to let's talk about healthcare because that is a big topic. It's something we chatted a little bit before we hit record about,
Yeah.
and the way earlier in the show, the way I was gonna kind of pivot it is like the tools that we're using, right, to for
Hmm.
stuff. But since you brought it up, let's just go there. Like, what are what are you trying to do? What is this boat that you're on that you're like, okay, let's get healthcare to millions of people? Because the reality is, yeah, there's a ton of us, myself included, who we're not insured, and so going to the
Yeah.
doctor is really scary because I'm gonna get slapped with a big fat medical bill.
Yeah. It's terrifying. And that societally, if you think about our health across the entire country, the access to care, the availability of care is lacking, right? And getting people connected to care that they can afford, care that they need, is a challenge. And what I've come to understand, and I've been at this company now for 4.5 years, and it's Be Well Connected Health. But we're in this space of how do we connect people to their medical information, and then how do we help them find the care that they need, right? Because the way that the US healthcare system worked, in especially from early on, is it was a pay for a service model, right? To where you said, I cut off my arm and I need to go to the emergency room, right? And so you're paying for this help with this event that has happened to you. And the more that we learn about the human body and the way our brains work, and I mean, the whole thing that we talked about with ADHD, right? ADHD wasn't a thing 100 years ago, right? People
Right.
didn't understand, the research hadn't been done, the drugs hadn't been developed, right? To understand how we could help people with these different conditions, right? And there's swaths of our population that have challenges like this and worse, right? To where they have high blood pressure, they're at risk for heart attack, they're diabetic, right? And they don't have access to the kinds of preventative care that are going to improve their life experience. And that is the space that my company is in. The challenging part about this is, for me, I see people on other boats, and I see people who are going out to protest or donating to food banks or taking food to families who are afraid to leave their house, right? And I'm like, I want to do that. It's very discreet. It's very I went and I did a thing, and I feel good, right? Because I did this demonstrable thing. When you're dealing with hundreds of years of legislation, right? And you're dealing with a market that is primarily based on capitalism and how do we maximize profits, you start getting into situations where um, it's a you have things like what we've seen with different insurance companies, to where they have entire departments that are dedicated to denying paying for your care because it's going to cost them money, and they're in the business of making money, not spending money, right? And we're like, how is healthcare so terrible in this country? And yet the heads of these companies are making $1 million bonuses, and the stock price keeps going up and up and up, right? So I work for this tiny little startup that's like, we are trying to change how this country does health. And what's been fascinating about the last few years is, as the administration of the government has changed, there is now the space we're in currently. The administration is much more likely to rule by edict than by legislation, right? So they're much more likely to sign something, right, than go work with Congress and figure out how to change things and change laws and do that. They're much more likely to just like, oh, you have a good idea? Okay, cool. Let's make it happen, right? And that is what has happened in the health industry, to where there's people in the like the they're not the Dr. Oz and the RFK Jr. that everyone is like throwing out. This guy said this thing and it's so stupid and I can't believe he would say that, right? That's a lot of the what the social media cycle's about. But the people who work for those people are people who have been there for 20 and 30 years. They know where it's broken. They know what needs to change, and they're actually getting a chance right now to change it. And that's the hard work that my company has been doing, is trying to be involved in legislative changes around Medicare and Medicaid and how that is administered, and how that data essentially is shared or not shared. So it's been this evolution, and we're right now at a point where 600 healthcare providers have signed a piece of paper agreeing that by, I believe it's June of this year, you will be able to, using their software, walk into a doctor's office, and instead of having to spend 15 minutes trying to remember every medication you've ever taken, every surgery you've ever had, and what diseases your mother's aunt's uncle had, right, that might still apply to you, that your physician might want to know about, to where you'll be able to scan a QR code and share that information with them, right? So that that's just one example of how we are trying to change the industry. And this is not something that like you can do as a weekend warrior on your Saturday for a few hours, right? This is time and energy and frustration. And like, what do you mean you want to fax us health information? The number one piece of technology for the last 40 years, still in use today, is faxes. I've talked to people who have worked in offices where they literally had a fax machine tied to another fax machine so they could get information from one provider and send it to another provider. So how do we work in this space, going back to the whole gray area, right? Because some of the stuff that's happening could be viewed from the lens of, oh my God, what do you mean that entity has my data? Or why would I ever consent to that
Right.
entity having my data, right? Um, and so as my company, and I say my company, I work there. It's not, I'm not one of the founders, but I'm fortunate enough to be part of this journey. Is that area of, we have taken a very firm stance that, number one, your data is your data. It is never shared with anyone else without your express consent. And number two, that consent needs to be readable and easily understood, and not 50 pages of garbage that in the end means you don't own your health data, but you're not going to take the time to read it because it's 50 pages long. Right. So it's trying to say, this is the future, this is where we can go, right? But you are still in control of your the things that affect you the most.
One of the big things a couple years ago, I worked a lot in the Web3 space, crypto, NFTs, those big
Mm.
bad words that a lot of people don't like. And Web3 also encapsulates AI. So to some degree, you
Mm.
could say I still work in the Web3 space because I use AI for a lot of stuff, and try to keep my thumb on what's going on there.
Yeah.
One of the things that working in the crypto space helped me to realize was there are options and there is the ability to like own your own data, like you were saying, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of times when we go on a website, right? TikTok is a good example of this. Instagram is a great example of this. Spotify is a great example of this. If you post your stuff onto those platforms, you no longer own it in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. They are able to
Yes.
use it. And this is very different from our health our health information, but there
Hmm.
are protective ways and there are digital wallets and things that they can protect your information, and it's not giving it out to it's not going to be trained on an AI thing, right? It's a closed wall garden kind of
Right.
situation. And I think that there's this kind of disconnect in people's brains of like we've been burned. Social media burned a lot of
Yeah.
us, I think, for
Fuck
just the
yeah.
fact of like for so long I've held this kind of belief. I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter if I delete my Facebook because guess what? They already have all that information anyways.
Yeah.
Amazon's already got all my information. There's nothing I can do about it, right? The reality is that there's new technologies that in the future can alleviate some of that. And so it's just shifting people's mindset to understand you can own it, you can protect it. It takes a little bit of work. It's not the easiest thing right now. There are people like your company who I'm sure are trying to make that easier and faster and more onboardable than it has ever been before. The first time I bought a piece of a crypto coin, it was a nightmare to do. I was convinced that I had just lost like I didn't even put that much. Maybe $50, $100, something like that. I was like, that money's
Yeah.
gone. I'm never gonna see that ever again. And then guess what? 24 hours later, I was like, oh, guess what? It's in my wallet. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about crypto, like it's okay. Like it's jargon. It's it
I've
is what it
done
is.
I've
But
done a little bit of it, because I in my manic phase, I was like, I'm gonna create a meme coin. Like, I'm gonna figure out how to do this. And then as I got into it, I was like, this thing is a fucking scam.
a
And
lot of
people
it
are
really
losing
is.
so much money. But I know also that there's a lot of good that can come out of it, right? There's a lot of good with having a stable currency that is worldwide and has the same value no matter where you're at in the world. Like things like that used to be the British pound. Now it's the US American dollar. Soon that's going to be some version of cryptocurrency, right? And it's one of those things that, like, there's still parts of me that doesn't like it. I don't like it, but it is going to happen, right? And that's how I feel a lot about the AI space. Is I get the concerns, right? I get the like they're building data centers and it uses so much power, and we're concerned about AI taking over the world. And there's sometimes I have to sit back and be like, I can't control that. It is outside of my control, right? And if there's a way that I get to influence how that world gets created so it is safer, so it is based on consent, so it is um, actually helping people instead of hurting them, then yes, I'm on board with those parts. But you know, an example of this is early. I'm going to keep referring to my manic phase because apparently I did way more than I even thought I did. But like I was experimenting with like, what if I made songs about my trauma, right? That would
Right.
resonate with people, right? So I went to an AI website and I put this stuff in. Dude, it made a song that made me cry. It was so real and so visceral and so like I could not have come up with the pairings of words and the imagery that it did because that's not my expertise, that's not my forte. So I was like, this is amazing, and I was trying to share it with people, and then I hit this point of like I started getting out more, which is another part of the journey. I started getting out more. I started going to see live music, and I was like, this is part of the human experience that I don't want to lose. And
Yeah.
so I like deleted that. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not like when I'm still on Spotify, I need to switch everybody over to Tidal or something. But like one of the things I hate about Spotify right now is that they are constantly suggesting AI songs, AI generated songs. And maybe there's a person behind this, maybe there's not, but I don't listen to music to hear an AI band and an AI voice. I listen to hear Noah Khan talk about his experience, right? That's what I connect with. I want to connect with a human. Um, so I think there's areas of that to where we can use AI to help us, but we should never ever be putting humans sharing their experiences at risk because we're running towards a simulation.
The other important thing I think that a lot of people don't understand is that all AI gets lumped together. And the reality
Mhm.
is there are very different forms of AI. If you have
Yes.
ever used Google, even
Yes.
before the AI stuff came out, you used a form of AI. And so
Yeah.
they vary in the levels of power that they consume and all these different
Mhm.
things. Generative AI is the big kind of scary thing that a lot of people talk about, and that's what they're referring to a lot of time. That's what you're talking about with the song creation. I've done that too.
Right.
I played around with it. It's really cool. It is a cool
Yeah.
technology. But like you, I got to the same point of like, now this is human creation, and I want to, as best I can, I want to leave it up to the humans. And
Yeah.
so it's figuring out where the good comes from it and the bad comes from it and those types of things. So again, that is where a lot of what we're talking about, owning your own data and those types of things, and how can AI influence, the healthcare system. A lot of those things happen inside of walled garden, large language models that are sectioned off. They're not training across the entirety of the internet. They are
Right.
locked into a server set. And, again, these are very technical terms. If you don't know what we're talking about, that's okay. Just understand it's getting put in a walled garden that is not it's not being trained. It's not, you're yeah, of course you can feed your health insurance stuff into ChatGPT, and I would not do that because guess what? That is going to train and then everybody has access to it. That's just a dumb move. Please don't do that. Um but there are these other areas of where it's like it can be sectioned off. The other
Yeah.
thing that I'll say about this too is that it can become more environmentally friendly, and that is a big push
Mm.
that a lot of people do have. So while we are hearing
Yes.
about all of the drinking water that is getting tainted, I live in Tennessee. In Memphis, Tennessee, XAI is down there. I'm not an Elon fanboy by any stretch of the imagination. What they're doing down there is really fucked up and it's screwed
Yep.
up, and they're breaking the law in a lot of cases.
Yep.
That can get
Same
better
here. I
though.
live
Right.
SpaceX, the Boring Company, and X are headquartered less than 5 miles from my house, and our river pollution is off the charts because
Yeah.
of what they're dumping in there. Like it's just a fact, right? And it is terrible. But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
Continue.
no, I just it can get better is what I guess
Yes.
what I'm saying. And there is
Yes.
hope for it to get
Yep.
better, and we always find ways to clean things up. That's that's the reality. Hopefully we do it sooner rather than later. And so
Right.
look for those people who are talking about those things because
Yes.
that's important. It feels like it's not happening and that that conversation is not happening. It really is. It's a lot quieter. We talked about it earlier with the way that social media is. It's always going to
Hmm.
push the negative. It's not going to
Yep.
push the positive. And so you really have to go digging for it because good stuff is happening in the world every single
It
day.
is.
And we are missing out on it because it is
Yeah.
not being shown. And so if you, like me, get worn out with turning on the news and it's just all bad, and it's just like I promise you, like go pick up a local newspaper, go like to your local library and like we have like a library thing that they put out that's our local area. Always good things in there of like this person is helping this and this is happening. There's a lot of good in the world. There's a lot of bad in the world too, but there's a lot of
Yeah.
good stuff happening in the world. And so go seek that out. I mean, like we were talking about, good in the world right here. You got diagnosed with ADHD, you've made some changes in your life, like things are
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah.
It's a positive. It's not a
Yeah.
negative. And
And
so,
and AI was part of that journey for me, right? Like I have Chat GPT open and I have it's not listening to us, but I have an ADHD coach, right? Uh, Agent or project or whatever they call it, right? To where I have uploaded my diagnosis. I go in there and I ask, like, based on the conversations that we've had over the past 2 weeks, would you recommend any changes to medication? Because I'm talking to my psychiatrist tomorrow, right? But I also go to my wife and I ask the same thing, right? Because AI doesn't know everything about me. um, but it has been a tool for me that has been super useful. And I want to go back just real quick to the concept of the walled gardens, right? Because one of the things my company is doing is we are partnering with OpenAI and we are adding a health connector. And again, it's completely based on consent. Like, this is not, hey, here's all the information we have about everyone who's ever used our product. It's yours now. It is literally, you have to go in and you have to consent and say, yes, for the purposes of this walled off garden, I am going to allow you to access my health data, and then bring that in, and then it be informed, and you be able to say, oh, like, I now know what my blood pressure looked like for the last 15 years because it's spread across 15 different portals, and it's unreachable in a lot of cases for me to know what my health trends have been over this time, right? So it's not, I get it, it's not for everyone, right? If you bubble up another layer, it's like, well, do I really trust Sam Altman? Do I really trust OpenAI? Like, I can't answer that question for
yeah,
anyone else other than myself, and it's a gray area for me. So, but
yeah,
people are already using it. So again, how can we make it safer? How can we make it more consent based? How can we do things that are, like you said, not pulling from the entire internet to where it's going to tell you, like, it's going to go find that one article that's like, don't vaccinate your kids for measles, and it's going to parrot that back at you as actual health advice, right? We've got to get away from that. And that's why, like you said, having different AIs that do different things are essentially specialists in this area. um, that's the direction that we need to continue to go in, so that there are these walled gardens to where it's helpful in the areas that we want it to be helpful in, and we take it out of the spaces that is going to ultimately hurt our creativity and our human experience. And I want to circle back. I know we're almost out of time. I want to circle back to something else that I think was really foundational for me in this whole, like, figuring out, getting diagnosed, and then having this period of like, I am just trying to connect to the world around me in so many ways. I was looking for friends because I didn't have friends. I had people that I talked and worked with on a computer screen for 8 hours a day. And that was my connection to the outside world. It's what happened to us during COVID. It's what's happened with completely remote companies. And there's pros and cons. But if you're listening to this and you don't have real in-person friends that you can call and you can say, hey, you want to come over and play a game tonight? Find ways to do that, because that was a lot of what I couldn't say it at the time, but that was why I was starting businesses. That's why I was like, I'm going to become a content creator, right, and go on the internet and connect with people. That's why I got so sucked into social media, because I thought those connections were what I needed, and what I needed was a hug. What I needed was to get out and watch a band that five other people are watching, and get up on stage with them, and like actually have real human interactions. One of the most amazing things that's happened to me in the last 6 months is I joined a baseball team, and Sandlot baseball is making a resurgence. I played baseball when I was 9 and 10 and haven't played since. And it's a friend group, and we get together, we see each other in person. Like tomorrow we're going to go to our home field, which is full of weeds, and like do some field work together and get our hands dirty. And those are experiences that the technology that we have today is making it easier and easier not to do and not to have those kinds of relationships. But we are fucking mammals, and we are pack animals, and we need other people. And that is everything else aside that's happened over the last year and a half. That is the number one thing I think that has helped me, is actually finding other humans that I get to see a couple times a week and hang out with. It's amazing.
It changes everything. Like
It
friends do,
does.
and that physical touch is like it yeah, it's what we've been talking about.
Yes.
Humans need human experience, and
Yes.
we can't replace that. And so, that is where that it's so important. And so, yeah, go find that. If you don't got it, like go find it. I don't want to say it's easy. It's like an easy hard. It's
Yeah.
not hard to go out and be around people. It's harder
Hmm.
to go out and be around people and build genuine connection. And so,
Yes.
but it's good and it's important, and do it. And so, text your buddy today, text your friends, say
Yep.
let's go get coffee, let's go do something stupid. Let's, come over, play a game, you know, whatever it might be. Like go do that, because yeah, it can make or break your whole week, I think.
Yeah.
So, RB, my guy, this has been so much fun. Is there anything else? Have we got we went all over the place, which I
We
think is awesome.
did. We did. You had an ADHD experience today. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, Rusty's telling me that it's time to be done. But dude, I'm so, again, thank you for using your platform to talk about these things. Thank you for helping drive the boat that you're on. Like I see it, I see you, I see the difference that you're making, and you've made a difference in my life. And in just understanding that my homeschool experience was not it was not unique, but it was also not the only homeschool experience, and that other people are taking it more seriously and are thinking through the cultural and the impacts that it has on a child's development when they are isolated. And I see families around here, that are choosing to homeschool, and I see a more intentional um, mindset towards the experience than what I had. So I am super grateful. about that. And thanks for having me on and talking about all the things.
Of course. Yeah, I think this is gonna have to be an annual thing now at this point. We'll just do
Right?
our yearly checkup.
Oh my God.
So
I don't know what's going to change in the next year for me, but that's a little anxiety producing, but also I'm here for it. Let's do it.
yeah. Yeah. And to the audience, thank you guys for sticking around. Hopefully you stuck around this whole time. If you did, leave a comment down below. Let me know you stuck around. Let me know your favorite part of the episode. And as always, all the links, all of the things will be down below. If you want to be on the show, if you've got a story to share, you know how to reach me. exhsclub@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Give me a little blurb about your story, and then we'll connect. We'll start chatting. I promise I don't bite. RB came back for a second run through the gamut, so I can't be that bad, okay?
Not at all. Not at all. No, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And yeah, until next time, we'll see ya. Peace.